Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, hosted by Echo and brought to you by Vertical Helicast and Vertical Valor magazine. In this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast, we sit down with Darren and Deb from the Echo Flight Crew Assistance and Support Team, or FAST, to explore the vital work they're doing in supporting flight crew members. They dive into the origins of FAST, its mission to provide peer support, and the crucial role mental health plays in high-stress, high-stakes environments. Throughout the conversation, the team reflects on personal experiences in flight medicine, the immediate need for support during crises, and the importance of building strong community for public safety aviation professionals. Highlighting the many services FAST provides, this episode underscores the significance of proactive mental health strategies, self-care, and reaching out when help is needed. Join us for an insightful discussion on the past, present, and future of FAST, and how it's expanding to better support the flight crew community. Thank you to our sponsors Metro Aviation, Airbus, and Vertical Valor magazine.
Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine. Produced in partnership with Echo, Every Coast Helicopter Operations, the Valor Flight Crew podcast promotes the personnel and life-saving equipment behind helicopter air ambulance services. Join hosts Mike Fideli and Blake Schreider for in-depth interviews and expert insights from air medical personnel, pilots, communication specialists, and maintenance crews who play critical roles in airborne emergency response.
Line 1 accepting.
Copy, Line 1, gotcha, accepting. You're going to be talking to Red Feather 1 on LCEMS.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast. My name is Mike Fideli. I'm here with Blake Schreider. We are your hosts for the VFC podcast. Blake, how's it going tonight?
Hey, it's going good, Mike. How you doing?
Doing pretty well. Can't complain. It's been an interesting few weeks here with the holidays, but I'm certainly glad that's over and moving forward, and it's the new year.
It is 2025, and it's starting out pretty cold, I guess, up there for you.
Yeah, a little bit. We were down in the 20s this week, so I'm sure that's nothing compared to some places of the country, but, in Florida, I'm sure your weather's a little bit nicer.
Yeah, it's like 56 right now, so not doing too bad.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure that'll get a little bit warmer here soon. I hope to make my way down to Florida before too long. We got a great show for you tonight. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce what we got going on. So tonight is going to be an interview with the Echo Flight Crew Assistance and Support Team and a couple of their members. This one's something that's near and dear to my heart. Has been involved with Echo for as long as I can remember. I think we got our start with FAST back in 2017. There was an informational session that was happening at the Echo Boston conference. That was the second Echo that I went to. And we kind of had a little discussion about, police, fire. They do a great job of taking care of themselves and taking care of each other. But in EMS, we really just don't do that, and especially in the HEMS community. So that was something that we wanted to change as an organization. And from that is where FAST was kind of born. And we started that organization in May of that year. Was kind of its infancy, and had the pleasure of working with Darren and then getting to know Deb through that whole process. So FAST has been a huge part of my life since I've been involved with Echo, and something that we really wanted to bring to the stage and bring to all of you guys to be able to kind of hopefully share some of our passion and why we think this part of the organization and part of Echo is so important.
And that's awesome. It's a really good peer support from my understanding. I've kind of only been introduced to FAST probably since my first official Echo conference was in Austin for the full-fledged thing. So that was my first experience with FAST. Didn't really know a whole lot about it, but as I got to know it, really kind of stood out to me as far as more of a peer support. And then it goes so much further than that, as I've learned over the past couple of years. So I'm really excited, Darren and Deb, to have you on, so that way you guys are able to kind of give us a little bit more in depth on what FAST does in the communities.
Without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Darren Gerardo and Deb Weaver. Welcome to the podcast. How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Good, thanks for having us.
It's great to have you guys on. We're really excited to talk with you guys about Flight Crew Assistance and Support Team and some of the services that you guys provide. It's, like I said, near and dear to my heart to be able to have you guys here and to be able to talk a little bit more about such an important team. But before we kind of get started and get into things, we'd like to do our icebreaker. Blake, you want to take that away?
Oh, yes. I almost forgot. I'm glad you reminded me. So we have an icebreaker that we bring to each show. So on your phones, if you're able to, on your your iPod or your music app, what was the song you were last currently listening to? I'd really like to hear the variety of songs that people listen to. And if you want, I can start with mine. If I pull mine up, I was listening to Zach Bryan, 68 Fastback. Was the last one on my queue.
Well, mine was Neil Young, Old Man.
Nice.
Believe it or not, mine was something called Swingle Jingle from Lionel Hampton.
Wow.
It is he's a jazz vibraphonist. So in case you
Nice.
haven't noticed, I've got some musical instruments here. So
That's
love
awesome. I'll have to look that one up when we're all done here.
Swingle Jingle.
Perfect. Mine, believe it or not, the last thing I was listening to happened to be a Hanger Z podcast about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago.
Nice.
But before that I was listening to The Highway on SXM, and
Awesome.
I forget what the song was it was on, but I've been in a country mood lately, so that's been where I'm at.
I love it.
All right. Well, welcome again to Deb and Darren. I just wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about your experience. So what kind of flight experience do you guys have? Where did you come from as clinicians? And tell us a little bit about yourselves. Whoever would like to go first.
Ladies first, Deb.
Okay, well, my name is Debbie, and I am a registered nurse. I'm also a flight medic. I flew as a nurse primarily. I flew for 33 years. I started in 1986 in a blended program where we're dual pilots, they're sheriff's deputies, and then we had a medical team that came from a local ambulance company and emergency room. We flew a single engine VFR military surplus Huey for 15 years. And we eventually transitioned out into dual engine McDonnell Douglas 900s, NOTARs. And we were a 91 program to begin with, and we eventually earned our own Part 135 certificate. I was a flight RN, a flight medic, and a line medic, and I also served as a chief flight nurse for 3 different stints for about total of about 15 years.
Wow, it's a pretty awesome career you've had so far in this industry. Certainly, it must be a passion of yours to be involved in so many different avenues and kind of grow through the ranks and go from being a frontliner to a chief flight nurse and be able to lead your team.
It is.
Awesome. Darren, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, sir?
Yeah. So my first degree actually was music education, believe it or not. But I fell into EMS by way of volunteering at the college. And it was all downhill from there, so to speak. And I got the bug.
You know how that goes.
Yeah. I got the bug and I wanted to be a flight nurse because that was back in the day when we were flying every trauma patient that came across our doorstep, you know. And I was like, I want to do that someday. And that's what really got me into, you know, going to nursing school. And, you know, the bulk of my experiences in critical care and ED. And then it was sometime around 2011, I managed to get my way into one of our local programs here in Pennsylvania as a critical care nurse on a ground truck. They were standing up a ground program. And from there, I was able to cross over to flight pretty quickly and absolutely fell in love with it. I did that for about 5 years. And, you know, I loved the job. And then I actually took a second job. I'm one of those crazy people. And, you know, this is normal in EMS, but not for most
Very
other
normal.
professions.
Yeah,
But
right.
I took on a per diem job, and that's actually where I met Mike. We met we were 2 per diem nurses who were hired for Hershey Lifeline, and we met in orientation that day. So that was, you know, pretty fun. And I was only there for about a year because it was a long commute for me, but
We miss you. Come back.
I would like to. I would like to. About 6 or 7 years ago, I jumped into the pool of nursing administration, which, you know, some days is great and other days I regret, but I still remain really connected to the flight community, both here and, you know, because of Echo across the nation. So really excited to kind of talk about some of the stuff we do as the FAST team. And yeah, that's me.
And thanks so much. So can you guys go ahead and just kind of tell us, we'll kick it off then. So how did, so tell us kind of about FAST. How did it start? And like, what was the concept behind FAST?
Well, I'll say Mike kind of alluded to it. And I remember joining Echo back in the day when it was the first time I went to an Echo conference was in Hagerstown, Maryland. And it was like coolers and, a bunch of things landed there. And
That's how we did things back then.
Yeah. Honestly, I just heard this story this past weekend from Trish about like the coolers with
The granola bars.
yes,
Granola
like
bars
Sam's
everywhere.
Club sandwiches and
Oh,
coolers
yeah.
of some drink. That's incredible.
And I remember being in, and it was hot. I remember the hangar being really hot, but it was a great educational conference. And then, it was like a year or two later when I was sitting down talking with John, and he said, "Hey, a couple of us have this idea," and he knew that I had done some lecturing on like suicide prevention and things like that. And I said, I really want to be part of this. And so it was, Mike, you said it was 17, right? I think.
Yeah,
when we started.
2017. The concept was kind of given to the Echo cohort on March of 2017. That was at the Echo Boston conference.
Yeah.
And then we had a little powwow meeting at an Airbnb at some point, and it's kind of core team members getting together and hashing things out. And we figured out what this whole thing is going to look like. And that was in May of 2017 that it officially became, a reality.
Yeah. And I think, initially we were really focused on what happens if there's a tragic event, what happens if there's a crash, how are we going to support people? But over the years, it really, I think, evolved into a lot more. We obviously still do that, but now there's so much other peer support that we offer. And I think that's really neat.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been a wild ride. And Debbie, if you don't mind, just to share a little bit about how you got involved with, Echo and FAST, and what kind of led you in this direction to be part of the team.
My path to FAST was a little bit different than yours. My flight crew, I was the chief flight nurse. My flight crew went to Hagerstown, and I stayed home and covered their shifts. And they came home and they're like, "Oh, you got to get involved in this thing. And they've got the greatest thing going. They've got this FAST team, and you are going to be so good at it." I didn't know anything about Echo or FAST, and they're on and on and on. I called Amanda, and I'm like, "Well, my flight team's not going to stop hounding me until I find out about this." And she was right. It was a glove that fit perfectly.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you. You've been an awesome addition to the team.
We had some stressors. We had a flight medic and a flight nurse that were fighting cancer at the same time on our team. And, we had a very small team, single aircraft program. And so there's only 20 of us, plus the pilots. So that's a big percentage of our flight crew that is trying to fight cancer. And our teams were stressed, and we were looking for ways to manage. They decided I had something to offer. So they offered me up to Amanda and Mike.
You were voluntold at the time. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I always say that Amanda's the reason that I ended up becoming part of FAST initially. And it's interesting because there was this informational session at Echo Boston, and Amanda and my other coworker, Ruth Ann, decided they were going to drag me along to this informational session. And I'm not really the touchy-feely type of person. I'm like, there's no way I can deal with all these feelings and emotions and all that stuff that's going on. And I just, I'm just the type that I like to push mine under the rug and just ignore them and keep on going about my day. And so we started talking about this whole concept of FAST. And it was something that I just realized was too important to not be involved in. And it was that was where the whole system kind of grew from there. We wanted to take care of ourselves, and we wanted, the people who do the job to take care of each other. And so it's been an awesome ride since then.
I had the experience of trying to refer flight crew to our EAP programs for various reasons, personal reasons, professional reasons. And they'd come back and they would say, "That was a waste of time. I spent the entire hour talking about my job, what I do," because she didn't have any idea what I was doing. So there was no support for the crew. And it became obvious to me that the best way I could support my crew is to teach other people how to support their crews.
And that kind of, Deb, I'm glad you brought that up. That kind of leads me into this next part. We're talking about what is like the mission and goal of FAST. And it's interesting that you bring up when you refer people through their place of employment and you go through EAP. It's tough, especially in our world, because if you end up having an incident or something where you have to go talk to EAP, I've personally had to do this. It's that same thing. You end up talking about your job, or you just, it doesn't, you don't really, I don't want to say you don't get anything out of it, but when you can talk to people that do the same job as you do, can at least relate. Like, I feel, at least from my perspective, it's definitely has more of a goal and more of that effect of what it's intended to do, to really offer that support versus somebody, while it's very well intended, it just doesn't quite relate as well. So I can speak to exactly what you're kind of referring to, where people went to EAP, spent time just talking about their job and didn't really get anything or make any progress. So if I may ask that, I assume that's one of the missions and goals of the FAST team, is to be able to help people through crisis or incidents and be able to relate.
Exactly.
So when we talk about FAST itself and that overall mission and goal, what kind of services do you guys provide as being part of FAST?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Best thing we provide is immediate support. If someone's in crisis or their team's in crisis, they pick up the phone, they dial the 800 number or the 866 number, and a flight crew member who will answer the phone. One of us, somebody that's got the boots and the helmet and the flight suit, will pick up the phone and say, "What can I do to help you?" You don't have to start in with, "I'm a flight medic and I fly with this aircraft and we were da, da, da." You don't have to do all that. The person at the other end of the phone knows what you do.
And if I can ask, is it if anybody can call with anything that they need an issue with, right? Correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, we think of these things as like, oh, I had a really bad call, that's when people typically think of the traditional peer support model, or like CISM or something like that. I had a really bad call. And sometimes that is what we get. But sometimes it's also people who are trying to balance, what's going on in their personal life with what's going on at work. And we're somebody who also can kind of understand that and be a good listening ear. So really it's a call for anything,
Sure.
Whatever you need, just give us a call. And if I pick up the phone and I don't exactly know, or I can't support in the best way, but I know that Mike or Debbie can, then, I text them and, connect them with the person. So, we've got a great network and resource. So really it's if you're finding yourself in need of some sort of support, any kind of support, give us a call.
Yeah. And what is that number that people can contact if they do have anything that they need to reach out about?
1-833-AIR-FAST.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, I mean, certainly the hotline is something that you guys have been really hitting hard, and I know is very active on a pretty regular basis. It's super helpful to have that person that certainly understands. I think none of us are immune to, being able to leave work at work and home at home. And a lot of times those things bleed over, and it's really hard to kind of either keep them separated or keep them all organized so that we can manage all tasks that are in front of us at any given time. So I know myself personally, I've reached out to a few of you guys on FAST and have had to have, discussions at various times when I've had things going on in my life. And it's just helpful to have somebody that understands the job and some of the personal responsibilities that you have going on. And it just kind of makes the conversation flow a lot easier and gives you that kind of overall sense that you're not alone in this.
A couple of other things, Mike, is it can be anonymous. You just say my first name, or you don't even have to say name. I don't care if you're a nurse or a medic or a pilot or a mechanic or a comm spec. I don't care any of those things. And the other thing, if you don't want to talk, we text.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really good.
And you text the same number.
Okay, so you can call or just text that same number, and
Correct.
That's how people can get a hold. And that's 24/7, yes?
It is.
It's definitely an awesome service. we certainly appreciate that, we have people like you guys that are willing to man that line 24/7 and make sure that that doesn't go unanswered.
We have teams too. So we rotate teams so that we know, during these 2 weeks, this team is the primary on-call people. And, that way it's not like you're stuck to a phone 24/7 as a volunteer for this,
Right.
for this support team. So and thankfully we've been able to keep recruiting people and keep adding to the teams. And so, it's become a really robust team. I think I remember back to the days when we started, Mike, and we were thinking, how are we actually going to cover this 24/7 with this small group of people that...
Yeah, we definitely recognize that we needed a lot more help.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
For sure.
So the hotline seems like an awesome resource, and I really hope that there are people that are utilizing this whenever they do happen to have a crisis or need someone to talk to. But with that in mind, talking about if I end up calling the Airfast hotline, I know you guys are flight crew members, but are you trained in anything else, or are you guys, is there counselors involved or things like that? So just so that people are kind of aware of what kind of scope of practice you guys have with answering that phone line.
We're peers. So if we feel that if our assessment or our triage appears that somebody needs more in-depth or more professional help, we can refer to them. But we're peers primarily.
So no counseling services. No, it's not a therapist you're talking to on the other line.
No.
It's somebody who just understands, somebody who can kind of, have an idea of what you're talking about in that situation and be able to, be an ear to listen to you.
Darren, what do you think? Like 90% of the time, that's all it takes?
Yeah, for sure. I think, we do have a little bit of formal training in terms of like a formal debrief, a SISM type model. But generally, when that tends to come out more when there's like a bigger incident that we're responding to. I think probably 90+% of the phone calls or texts we receive is truly just peer support, just somebody who can listen and understand. And yes, like Debbie said, if it seems like somebody needs more help, we're glad to help find that for them.
Sure.
If you live in, Pennsylvania, we might have some resources that, Mike and I know about, or if you're in New York, Debbie might know. And so we can reach out to our network and try to find, if you do need a therapist, is there one in your area who knows about fire and EMS and emergency services and things like that?
My next question, just kind of dovetailing off of that, would be, if I'm having difficulty with something, why not just talk to my coworker? Why call the hotline?
Because they run and tell the administration and management, and they don't want to fly with you anymore, and they think you're weak, and they think you're not fit for duty. And
yeah, and I think that was always like my draw to it, and that's why I've certainly talked with members on FAST. It's somebody that I don't have to go to work the next day and work with and look in the face when I probably just broke down and spilled my guts to them about, what's bugging me at that point in time. So it was somebody that was kind of a neutral source that didn't have any affiliation, that I knew it was completely confidential and that I didn't have to worry about them telling anybody. For me, that was a big help rather than sitting down and talking to somebody necessarily that I work with or fly with on a daily basis.
And I think, one of the things that's interesting about that is when you are on a flight crew, you are like the people who are coming to help save the day or help transport this incredibly critically ill patient, And so we're used to being the people who can keep it all together and who don't appear weak, we instill confidence. And so, we're wired that way. But I think when we talk about looking at ourselves, then it becomes really hard for us to sometimes break out of that persona, so to speak. And I think having that sometimes third party, somebody who isn't connected with you, the ability to stay anonymous, I think allows us to become a little more vulnerable in the moment as well.
So for Darren and Deb and Mike, for everybody. So I mean, with that in mind, I mean, that brings up kind of a good question. So how do we, as a community and as a whole, like how do we maintain longevity while doing this line of work and maintain a positive mental health outlook and be able to stay long-term. Deb, you've been flying for 33 years, you said?
Yep. You got to preserve your own health. You have to take care of your own well-being. It's really, really hard sometimes to put yourself first, but you have to do it. You can't pick up every overtime shift. You can't pick up every shift for your coworker. You need to figure out the balance of your life. You can't live in the helicopter. Even though sometimes it feels like you're living in a helicopter, you can't really live in a helicopter.
Yeah, well, it's fourth flight in for the day. Like, is this day ever going to end?
You feel like you're living in it. Well, I think that just brings up that reiterates that balance of your work life, your home life, and things that are near and dear to your heart, and doing things that can relieve that stress. Like Darren said, like for those of us that do this line of work, we're the ones that people call when they need help, right? Like we're supposed to be the ones to come in and fix no matter what's going wrong. And even though sometimes we can't, we hide it really well, and we do a really good job of sorting things out, and we take care of that patient, and then we get back, and then we have to chart, and then we have to, restock and get meds, and then we have another flight, and then we keep going on. And I think it's important that we reiterate that we've also got to take that time for ourselves, because it just can pile up for day after day, shift after shift, week after week. And then next thing you know, a few months down the road, your coworkers start to notice. And then, Mike, like you said, do you want to tell your coworker like what's going on? Because we're afraid of that stigma that it puts on us, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, at least that's kind of like, how I've felt personally in the past. So it's just one of the biggest things that I have learned from working with just FAST over the past, being a part of a FAST meeting, about a week or so ago, was really beneficial to just see all the different types of support that you guys offer to help all of us in this field really maintain that positive mental health. So I thank you for having this team and having that support out there for everybody.
So guys, we kind of talked about the hotline quite a bit here, and I think that that's certainly something that's extremely important. But is there any other services that FAST provides, or any other kind of tips or tricks that they have at their fingertips should somebody be having a crisis that you guys are able to bring to the table?
Well, I think, we've got a section of the Echo website that has, just some really basic self-care stuff on it. Some of the other things that we do is try to be proactive and get the message out there about mental health and well-being, and really try to decrease the stigma around that. That's part of what this podcast is about, right? We want people to know that it's okay to not be okay, and I think that is another big part of probably what our mission is that we need to keep driving home that point that being stressed or being, really in not a great place does not mean you're weak. And so I think, the more that we can also educate at Echo conferences, at other, future flight crew, stuff like that is really important as well.
I think that's a really big concept. Is, we've always looked at, the concept of being strong as being okay. And I think sometimes it takes a stronger person to admit that you're not okay in that moment, and to be able to have the confidence in yourself or someone else to be able to divulge that information to them and be able to start working through the process. Because I think once you're able to process that,
It's okay not to be okay.
it absolutely is. And I think that, that stigma is slowly changing, but it's been a very long, slow road to get there. And I think that we still have a long way to go.
I agree. I think I've seen, from the past few conferences, more and more programs that are starting, like in their agencies, their own type of peer support, kind of like what they would equate to their FAST team, So like I know at our agency, we have a peer support team. I know there's a lot of agencies. So I think, Mike, like you said, it's some slow traction, to finally get to that point. But I feel like it's time. We've lost enough people for many years where people didn't feel like they had an outlet or a way to try to get some help. So I know I'm really glad to see a lot of this gaining traction across the country for programs to allow people to, have a chance to just voice what's bothering them and to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's certainly a much needed service. And I think those internal peer support teams are great for a lot of those agencies, but I certainly think there are some other things that happen within agencies that sometimes it's better to have that outside resource. And so that's something where FAST can be that unbiased outside resource and be able to provide some additional assistance.
Yes.
I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you get help from as long as you get help when you need it. That's ultimately what matters. And so whatever resources are available at your fingertips, I think is something that is extremely important. And I'm so glad that you guys are out there fighting for that every day and making sure that resource is available. So I did want to ask, so I had heard recently that we now have couple therapy dogs. Is that correct? You guys able to talk about those at all? And also, in addition to that, we have the hotline, but is there ever a time where in-person boots on the ground support is more warranted?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
I'll talk about the dogs. My original job with FAST was to
Debbie, we know how much you love dogs.
to find the therapy dogs in whatever city we were doing our education in.
Sure.
So I'd get to get these dogs that would come to all of our conferences. And then one of our FAST members said, I rescue dogs. I can train them to be service dogs. So we have now 2 certified comfort dogs that are deployable. And we take them on deployments when it's feasible, when it's appropriate. And these dogs come in. Nurses and medics are, believe it or not, easier to talk to than pilots and mechanics. And when you go to these situations, the pilots and mechanics are sitting arms crossed, legs crossed, not making eye contact with anyone. And these dogs just go curl right up at their feet. And before you know it, the pilot or mechanic is scratching his head, rubbing his ears. They don't talk very much because of the implications with the NTSB, but they certainly get a lot of benefit from these animals. And we're so fortunate to have them.
That's amazing.
That sounds like a really great addition to the team.
I would say, as you mentioned, Mike, boots on the ground, I've been on a few deployments. But one that I went to was, I think, one of the first ones when we actually had the therapy dogs that were able to deploy with us. And to Debbie's point, it was just amazing to watch how it changed the dynamic in the room, to have this dog walking around and people be able to just feel comfortable and have that, that thing of comfort that was familiar to them.
Yeah, it really helps to break down those barriers, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. That's super exciting to be able to have them as part of FAST specifically. I think it's great to have those resources, Debbie, that you had reached out to, across the country for when we are having to travel further distances, but to have a few of those dogs be part of the core team of Echo FAST, I think is an awesome addition.
If I can ask, how could someone get involved with FAST?
Well, first you have to get involved with Echo.
That's exactly what I was going to say. First join Echo.
We want everybody involved in Echo.
Step 1, everybody get involved.
And then we rope you in from there.
I mean, really, it's just about expressing interest. And then, we have once every year or so, we tend to onboard a new group of people. I don't think we have any set timeline for when we do that, but we get people who are interested, and then we do a little bit of training and add them to our team.
At last count, I think we have people from 17 different agencies from all over the United States, East Coast to West Coast. So it's not like all a bunch from the same agency, where usually singletons or doubles from one agency and then go a couple of states over, and you got a couple more and a couple more until you get across the country.
That's really good. So it sounds like you guys, from a FAST team perspective, have a pretty good reach nationwide.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like we the people who deploy on any given, if we need a boots on the ground response, sometimes they're the closer people, but sometimes actually not, because maybe we want that degree of separation or something like that. And so
Right.
you might have somebody from the East Coast deploying over to the West Coast, and that's okay.
We've even done a lot of work in Alaska. In fact, we have a scholarship named after a flight nurse that was lost in a crash in Alaska several years ago. It's called the Stacy Morse Memorial Scholarship.
Yes.
And every year we give a scholarship to an upcoming nurse, because Stacy was a nurse, to help her further her education so she can someday be a flight nurse.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome program and a great way to honor Stacy. Stacy was part of the Echo family, and it's no secret with all of that. She was affectionately referred to as Alaska 2, and was an amazing member of the Echo family. And so it's a wonderful way to be able to honor her every single year and make sure that the legacy of Stacy and Delta Ray continue on. So I think we've talked a lot about kind of someone who may be in crisis, or if there's a significant event with a program where you guys may have to respond and do some boots on the ground. And a lot of that is very reactive type of way of looking at things. Is there anything that you guys any key points that you can share with us as far as being proactive, as far as keeping kind of, a good set of maybe tools in your toolbox to be able to manage some of these situations when they do happen to arise, that we can hopefully try to spread the word on and help people kind of buff up those tools and make sure that they're, at least a little bit more prepared in a situation should something happen to them?
I mean, I think there's a boatload of online resources available, right, that people can access ahead of time, like checkup from the neck up. There's all kinds of stuff if you want to go hunting a little bit. But I also think, if I can be a little vulnerable right now, oftentimes we think of, and even on this podcast, we've talked about people going to therapy because they've reached a point of crisis, and which was me at one point. I wouldn't say crisis, but like I needed some therapy. And what I will tell you is that it is much more valuable to me now going regularly as a kind of preventative thing. And so I think some of that, and listen, it's not for everyone either. But if you can find a good person who you can connect with, it could be worth its weight in gold, in terms of preventive strategies. So that's one thing I would say for everyone to just consider, like, try going for a little bit and, see what you can find out, see what you like about it or don't like about it. But I think thinking about therapy in a more proactive way instead of reactive is a great way to start.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I myself see a therapist regularly, and I actually look forward to those sessions, every other week or monthly. It's a way for me to be able to just kind of decompress everything that's happened in the previous few weeks and make sure that I'm processing appropriately, and that those, things aren't building up or, continuing to sweep them under the rug like I used to do. And so it's now sometimes, when I get together with my therapist, it kind of feels like we're just catching up, like it's old friends. But, then there's those times that, you really do need to have that person be able to hash things out with. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I think that that's something that, if you can find the right person that you click with and you jive with, that it can really be a positive experience. So appreciate you sharing that, Darren.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
The nurse in me says the old standby: stay hydrated, eat good food, not Red Bull, not coffee, not Slurpees, but water. And
Oh, come on. That's a staple diet around the
fruits
station.
and vegetables, get a good night's sleep, no cell phones in bed with you. That
Yeah.
stuff goes a long way too.
Yeah, for sure.
In
I
a
think
perfect
somewhat,
world, right?
the regular routine too, right? Like, I think it's so easy for us to get off of that routine, and when we're working a 24-hour shift, or, we've had a really long day where, it's flight number 4 or 5 and things have just been crazy busy, or it's one of those where you just have a crazy call and you get home from work exhausted, and the first thing you do is probably pour yourself a little drink, right? And maybe that's not the best choice that all of us make, but I know it's a choice that we often do make. I'm certainly guilty of that myself. And so I think having some of those other reminders of just like the daily things. I mean, for me, I've tried to in the past year kind of change my habits a little bit. And then instead of going, home right after work, I go to the gym first and trying to get a little bit of stress, energy out at the gym, which has been extremely helpful for me. And so I think just some of those like basic needs, like you mentioned, Debbie, like making sure that you are eating the right things, that you're getting plenty of water, that you're getting plenty of sleep, and that you're taking care of yourself, is sometimes the biggest pieces of that puzzle.
Yeah, I'll second or third that. I see somebody on the regular, monthly, and it's great how when you do establish or you find somebody, like you said, Mike, like you'll have a session and you feel like you're just catching up, and then over that course of time in between, life happens, and then you're like, oh, hey, this is what's really been going on, and then you find that person that's able to help guide you through some of those processes. So I've been regularly seeing somebody now for 5 years, and it's been nothing but helpful for me. I wish I could say the same about the gym. I definitely don't do that. It sounds it sounds really painful. My arms hurt just thinking about that. But I mean, other things I would like to start doing some walking or just those little things that decompress.
Yeah.
When you get home at the end of the night, it's also seeing my family is a huge thing. I've really tried to find those, separating those balances, separating work from home life and really leaving work at work, coming home and enjoying being home with my family and just trying to make those solid points.
Yeah.
Like those are the reaffirmations. At least I feel like that I haven't had to for many years. And all I did was ever drown and involve myself in work. And almost 20 years later, this is what kind of ends up, but really trying to find that balance has been just a mindset that I've tried to adopt.
Yeah, I think that's something, like you were saying there, Blake, it's something that really is different for everybody, right? Like, what works for me doesn't work for you, doesn't work for Darren, doesn't work for Deb. But something else may be, that key activity or that key, getaway where you can escape whatever's going on in your mind at that point in time and really kind of reset. So I think that that's certainly something that's extremely important, that everybody needs to find what works for them. And, I can't run. The only place you'll catch me running is to the refrigerator. However, I do love me some food, but I need to do that in moderation, in those high stress events too. But, I admire people who can go out and, just throw in a pair of headphones and run for 2 hours. Like that just will never happen in my world. And that's okay. And I'm all right with that, but I'm happy to go to the gym and get, an hour and a half lift session. And so, whatever happens to work for you. And I think that's half the battle sometimes. It's just figuring out what makes it meaningful in your mind and something that is impactful for you. That's kind of talking about, pre-crisis, like some of the tools that you can have in your toolbox, which I think is extremely important. But aside of, calling the hotline, what about if somebody actually is experiencing a crisis event at that point in time? What are some tips or tricks that you can tell them or have them help them a little bit in that situation to deal with that crisis in the immediate phase? Say they still maybe haven't reached out to somebody, they're in the process of reaching out. What are some things that they might be able to do in those moments to help them through that?
I think the biggest thing that I've ever, experienced or tried to help people with in that moment is concentrate on your breathing. If nothing else, just focus on in and out and focus on that for a good 2 or 3 minutes and try to block everything else out. And that can kind of help to get you centered and get you thinking a little more clearly. And then I think it is figuring out, okay, who's my resource? Who am I going to call to help me with this crisis,
And Darren, you mentioned the breathing, and one of the concepts that we've kind of talked about or that I've heard quite a bit about is the concept of box breathing. And it kind of does exactly what you said about being able to reset that brain. And so essentially you're going to, create a box and then divide that in 4. And so you have 4 smaller boxes within that box. And you want to spend a couple of seconds in each of those boxes with your breathing. So you're going to breathe in for a total of, 4 or 5 seconds, however long you can. I guess it depends on your vital capacity, right? We don't need to get into that lecture this time, but breathe in for a couple of seconds, and then you're going to hold it for a couple of seconds, and physically count in your head, count out to 4 or 5. Exhale, counting 4 to 5 seconds, hold for 4 to 5 seconds, inhale for 4 to 5 seconds, hold for 4 to 5 seconds, exhale for 4 to 5 seconds, and hold for 4 to 5 seconds. And so physically counting in that moment is something that's going to force your brain to focus on that one particular concept or task at that point. And it kind of breaks that cycle, because I think when we're in that crisis mode, like our brains automatically go all the wrong places. And it's really hard to break that cycle sometimes. And so I think that having that concept of box breathing and being able to reset your brain and have it refocus so that you have that time to be able to contact or reach out to somebody that you may need to, that might be able to listen to or hear you through that situation. So I'm glad that you brought up just that, focusing on the one small little aspect. And it seems like something that's so minuscule and so like elementary in nature, but it's something that we normally don't think about. And when we do have to think about it, it really takes away all of the other crazy racing thoughts that are going through our brain at that point in time.
Stay ahead of the mission with Vertical Valor Magazine, the only publication dedicated exclusively to the military and public safety sectors of the rotorcraft industry. The Valor team travels around the globe to bring you stories from the rotorcraft industry's first responders, with a special focus on the knowledge and technology that furthers their missions. Learn more at verticalmag.com/valor.
Yeah, I think, another technique that I think can be really helpful is, some guided imagery, and you can,
I like that.
You can Google this, and there's YouTube videos that you could just put on that would guide you through it. But, one that I like is, you're imagining yourself in a forest, and there's a creek, and a leaf falls down into the creek and it's on the water, and you take whatever that is that you're worrying about and you put it on the leaf and you watch it flow down the stream, and it kind of like that's just one really simple example of guided imagery. There's so much you could do with it, but that was one that resonated with me because it was like I could take my problem and watch it kind of float away.
I like that. Yeah, it's certainly not something that I've utilized, but I like it. And I think, I might add that into my toolbox a little bit. So I've got that in the future.
Awesome.
I think I've done the imagery. I haven't done the guided part of it, like putting the issue on the leaf, but that sounds really great. Cause I think a lot of people in our own ways, especially for me, I'm always like, all right, stop, take a breath. When you start to feel those like really anxious or just really fast racing thoughts, like, okay, take a breath. And it's essentially the box breathing or whatever, some variation that I end up coming up with. But it allows that to slow down. But I kind of like that guided imagery, and just I'll take that problem, put it on the leaf, and bye.
Debbie, any tips or tricks that you have to help if people are in kind of that immediate crisis situation?
I always revert back to the one as new providers. You take your pulse before you take the patient's pulse. Make sure that get with
I like
yourself.
that. Yeah, for sure. Make sure we're not an SVT, and then we can proceed with caution. So we've kind of talked a lot about some of the services that FAST offers, and it seems like a lot of that is geared towards individuals themselves and potentially crews. If you guys are doing some boots on the ground stuff, do you guys do anything to help support families along the way?
I would say yes, of course. Just because somebody is not actually somebody who flies, but they're related to somebody who does, doesn't mean we can't support them as well. I think, it probably depends on the situation, how much or how little we get involved with families, because every situation's a little bit different. But I know that I've personally helped support family members, and on a deployment met with other family members even one time, and so I think it's helpful. I think that they know, if nothing else, they know and understand that there's somebody supporting their loved one. So that makes them feel better inherently, but also that we can be a resource for them. I even think about a long time ago, we were talking about like, do we need to go mow the lawn at somebody's house or something like
Sure.
that, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
And Mike, I think you were with me for that one when we were having those discussions. But like,
Yeah, we certainly.
but
certainly
truly, I
do.
mean, listen, I can push a lawnmower. That's fine, you know?
Yeah. But I think that's, an interesting concept in that, I love doing my job, but, I wouldn't be able to do my job without the love and the support of my family. And I feel like they oftentimes may grieve or perceive or understand things a little bit differently. So I think it's sometimes hard for families to necessarily comprehend some of the things that we're going through. And I think that they have difficulties kind of understanding some of these situations. And so I was just curious if you guys have been doing a lot of work with families to be able to kind of be that support system for them as well, if they are a family member of a flight crew member.
I know in some of the crashes that we have remembered the lost flight crew on anniversaries or birth dates, or just to make sure that the families understand that their loved one isn't forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That's really nice.
They become part of the Echo family. All right. Blake, did you have any other questions for them at this point?
I think I just had one more. What does Darren or Deb? What's the future look like for Fast? What are like things on the horizon? Growing? Any big news?
I think we're looking towards expanding maybe north and south of the border eventually, and perhaps even to Europe in the long range forecast.
That's important too. I mean, especially with the conference now, like we're getting more and more folks internationally coming to the conference each year and kind of getting that word out. So that's really cool. That's really good getting people on board for that. Awesome.
Yeah, hopefully there'll be another training soon coming up. Bring on some more team members.
I think one of the things I think about too is sustainability, like not only in terms of members, but then, how do we make sure we can keep providing this service? It's not, if we do a boots on the ground deployment, it's not exactly cheap. And so how do we make sure we continue to always have the funds available to do that?
Sure.
Because I would never want to see this team go away for that reason,
Right.
So I think that's really important in terms of, anything that you're doing nowadays is making sure you're sustainable.
And I think that's also something to stress to our members is that, while everything can be anonymous, it's completely confidential. It's peer support services that are provided, but it's also completely free. We don't ask for anything. If there's, donations that an organization or individuals would like to make, that's wonderful. And we certainly appreciate that. But any of the money that Echo is able to make through our vendors and sponsors and donations goes immediately back into flight crews. And part of that is to help to support the flight crew assistance and support team, because there'll never be a cost for any of our flight crew members out there that need peer support.
Yeah. And then I think, something that's been on my mind, and we touched on it a little, is, how do we be more proactive? How do we beef up our education, our outreach, our, things like that?
Because it's not really like a sexy thing to talk about, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So like, how do we be more proactive in those situations?
One thing that we work really hard is making sure every base in the country has our phone number. Even if you have your own team and your own agency or your own company, make sure that our phone numbers are available for any provider. It doesn't have to be medics or nurses. It can be pilots, mechanics, comm specs.
I have like 3 signs and magnets on the fridges at work, so
Good.
it's everywhere.
We love to see them everywhere. Just, so that people understand that there's always somebody to talk to should they need it. That's awesome. So thank you again to Debbie and Darren. Really appreciate you guys coming and joining us. It's amazing being able to talk about all the different things that FAST has been able to provide over the years, whether that be the boots on the ground support, whether that be 24/7 hotline support. Now the addition of the therapy dogs and being able to, presume in the age of COVID, be able to do some virtual stuff as well, should we need any support for other teams. So it's amazing to be able to have those services available. And we really thank you guys and the rest of your team. If somebody would like to contact FAST, whether you'd like to be part of FAST, you can certainly go to the Echo Flight Crew website and click on the FAST page. There should be a link down there where someone can look at getting involved. If you or any of your crew members need some assistance from the Flight Crew Assistance and Support Team, don't ever hesitate to reach out. The number is 1-833-AIR-FAST. That would be 247-3278. Or you can email somebody on the FAST team at fast@echoflightcrew.org. Really can't thank you guys enough. Thank you, Deb and Darren. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you guys today. And can't wait to see you at the next conference, which hopefully we'll know a little bit more about here very soon. But thank you again to all of you guys. Thank you to our listeners out there for your continued support of Vertical Hellcast platform and the Valor Flight Crew podcast. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks for coming on, Darren and Debbie. It is nice to meet you guys, and thanks for all the input.
Thanks for having us.
We'll see you guys.
All right, we'll see you guys.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Stay ahead of the mission with Vertical Valor Magazine, the only publication dedicated exclusively to the military and public safety sectors of the rotorcraft industry. The Valor team travels around the globe to bring you stories from the rotorcraft industry's first responders, with a special focus on the knowledge and technology that furthers their missions. Learn more at verticalmag.com/valor. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. A big thank you to Darren and Deb from the Echo Flight Crew Assistance and Support Team for sharing their invaluable insights and the important work they're doing to support flight crews. From peer support to mental health strategies, it's clear that FAST is making a difference in the lives of public safety aviation professionals across the country. If you're part of the flight crew community, remember, support is always there for you. Don't hesitate to reach out when you need it, whether it's for yourself or for a colleague. Be proactive, take care of your mental health, and build the connections that matter. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Valor Flight Crew podcast, where we continue to highlight the people and stories that make public safety aviation safer and stronger.